Hi everyone, Partial Prophet here. I am new to YouTube. This is my first video, so I hope you like it. I didn't realize how hard it was to make videos until I worked on this one, and so now I appreciate people I've been watching on YouTube so much more. Thanks for the work that everyone does out there. I really appreciate it. So this video is going to be called Prophesying and Seen in Part by the Partial Prophet. And so I have I don't know if you can see those little emojis. They're squinting, and so that represents us and how we see in part. And then I have the eyeballs, and that represents Jesus who sees fully. So let's go look at the verse that talks about this. And this is in 1 Corinthians 13. So I'm going to start reading. On the left-hand side, I got NASB, the New American Standard. I really like that translation. It's a great translation. I highly recommend it. And so I'm starting in verse 8. Love never fails, but if there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away. If there are tongues, they will cease. If there is knowledge, it will be done away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part. But when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became a man, I did away with childish things. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, but then I will know fully, just as I also have been fully known. Okay, and so let's read it. I'm going to read it in the LAT translation. Some of these verses, because I like how they say things. Okay, so verse 9, now our knowledge is partial and incomplete, and even the gift of prophecy reveals only part of the whole picture. But when the time of perfection comes, these partial things will become useless. Verse 12, now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror, but then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All that I know now is partial and incomplete, but then I will know everything completely, just as God now knows me completely. Okay, so I love how it says it in the LAT because it describes it so well. I mean, we're seeing things imperfectly, and puzzling reflections. I mean, that's just so accurate. We see all these prophecies in the Bible, and it's puzzling what God's trying to say sometimes. And so what's great about it is that when Jesus comes, we're going to see everything with perfect clarity. We know that Jesus is the perfect, so when he comes, we will see things perfectly. And so I wanted to talk about shadows. And so let's go to Colossians 2. So 2 verse 16. Let me get down there. Okay. So the Bible talks about shadows. In Colossians 2:16, it says, therefore no one is to act as your judge in regard to food or drink, or in respect to a festival or a new moon or a Sabbath day, things which are a mere shadow of what is to come. But the substance belongs to Christ. Let no one keep defrauding you of your prize by delighting in self-abasement and the worship of angels, taking a stand on visions he has seen, inflated without cause by his fleshly mind, and not holding fast to the head, from whom the entire body, being supplied and held together by joints and ligaments, grows with the growth which is from God. So it's talking about shadows. So it talks about how the Sabbaths and the festivals and even food or drink are considered shadows. And so in the LAT it says, let's read how it says it over there. In verse 17 it says, for these rules are only shadows. I don't like how it uses the word rules. I like how NASB uses things instead. For these rules are only shadows of the reality yet to come, and Christ himself is that reality. Verse 18 is a really good verse that talks about what I consider the self-appointed anointeds. So let's see what the Bible has to say about them. Don't let anyone condemn you by insisting on pious self-denial or the worship of angels, saying they have had visions about these things. Their sinful minds have made them proud, and they are not connected to Christ, the head of the body, for he holds the whole body together with its joints and ligaments, and it grows as God nourishes it. Um, yeah. So be careful. In verse 22, it says, such rules are mere human teachings about things that deteriorate as we use them. So basically, I kind of got off into a tangent talking about the self-appointed anointeds. So what I was going to say about that is, there's a lot of people on YouTube that claim to have visions and stuff like that. And I would highly recommend that you pay attention to the people that really speak with humility. This one talks about, kind of the pride. Their sinful minds have made them proud. So just have a yellow or red flag for those people that come across as proud, like they know all the answers. When we read about the Bible having shadows and how we see in part, we understand that we're in this season right now where we're prophesying in part. And so these people that come across like they know the answer and come across really self-assured, we have to be careful of them because they're they're being proud. They don't understand that we all see in part. And in that we might think we understand something, but when Jesus comes, our eyes are going to be open to the whole truth. And so I just wanted, I'm not saying at all don't watch them on YouTube. Go ahead and watch them, but have discernment about who's proud and who doesn't show humility. You could still learn from them. But just have caution. So anyway, so back to the shadows. Let's look at Hebrews 8 because that talks about shadows too. Okay, so Hebrews 8:5 is what I'm looking for. Okay. So, starting at verse 4, now if he were on earth, he would not be a priest at all, since there are those who offer the gifts according to the law, who serve a copy and shadow of the heavenly things, just as Moses was warned by God when he was about to erect the tabernacle. For see, he says that you make all things according to the pattern which was shown you on the mountain. So what we learn from this is that when we read in the Old Testament about the tabernacle, that it's a copy and a shadow of the real one in heaven, just as it says on the right-hand side in verse 5 in the NLT. The tabernacle, God gave Moses the direction for the tabernacle, and there when we read about it, it's all these numbers and just all these directions of how Moses was to design it. And so we learn that there's a pattern that God has in the things that he put in his word. And they're a copy and a shadow of the heavenly things. So God was, like giving us this tabernacle to teach us about the heavenly. But the tabernacle itself is only a copy, a shadow of the real one in heaven. And so, like I said, when the perfect comes, when Jesus comes, we will see the perfect tabernacle. So keep that in mind. We're living under shadows right now. And then let's skip over to Hebrews 10. Okay, so same thing. Hebrews 10:1 says, for the law, since it has a shadow of the good things to come and not the very form of things, can never, by the same sacrifices which they offer continually year by year, make perfect those who draw near. Otherwise, they would not have ceased to be offered, because the worshippers, having been cleansed having once been cleansed, would no longer have had consciousness of sins. But in those sacrifices, there is a reminder of sins year by year. For it is impossible for the blood of bulls and goats to take away sins. Therefore, when he comes into the world, he says, Sacrifice and offering you have not desired, but a body you have prepared for me. In whole burnt offerings and sacrifices for sin you have taken no pleasure. Then I said, Behold, I have come. In the scroll of the book it is written of me to do your will, O God. So, and skipping down to verse 9, it says, He takes away the first in order to establish the second. NLT puts it this way: He cancels the first covenant in order to put the second into effect. So there's a new covenant coming, when Jesus comes, that's better than the original. Anyways, so we're living under shadows. So another thing I wanted to point out about why we prophesy in part. I guess just another point on shadows. So, the Bible talks about, we got the tabernacle, we got clouds is kind of a very interesting theme that you see throughout the Bible. Goats and lambs. Jesus talks about the sheep and the goats. There are a lot of pictures that God likes to use, and he's painting a picture, but we don't fully understand it right now. So when we read about clouds, we don't really understand what he's saying. When they were wandering in the wilderness, they had clouds. They had cloud, I think the cloud by day and the fire by night. And so there's something that God's saying about the cloud by day and the fire by night, and we'll learn about that when Jesus comes. Okay, so another thing I wanted to talk about is the pronouns in the Bible. So for that, let's go to Daniel 9. Okay. So this verse gets used a lot when we're talking about prophecy. I think it's very significant. Verse 26, it says, And after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. And the people of the prince who is to come will destroy the city and the sanctuary. And its end will come with a flood. Even to the end there will be war. Desolations are determined. Verse 27, this is the verse you hear all the time. And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. But in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offerings. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate, even until a complete destruction, one that is decreed, is poured out on the one who makes desolate. Okay, so in this verse, I want to point out, in verse 26, God mentions both the Messiah and the prince who is to come. Okay, well, so then in verse 27, so both of those are talked about in verse 26. So then in verse 27, God is using the pronoun he. And I have a picture of that over here. Okay, I circled the he. And he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. Okay, so God in verse 26 was just talking about both the Messiah and the prince who is to come. So I wanted to point out that it's not very clear who God is talking about when he says he. Now, a lot of people have taken this verse 27 with the firm covenant, and they've applied it to the prince who is to come, which is the Antichrist, who causes all the desolation. But it is possible. I'm just pointing out another way we could look at this, and this is where, we prophesy in part, and so I don't really know who's accurate. But sometimes when I look at the verse, I wonder if the he who's going to make a firm covenant, if it's possible that could be the Messiah. Because what happens is you have verse 26 and verse 27 kind of following the same pattern, where they both have like an A and a B pattern, where A is where we're talking about the Messiah, and then B is talking about the prince who is to come. And then in 27, we talk about the Messiah in the first few, maybe the first sentence. And then we go back and talk about the Antichrist. So there's a possible pattern there that people are missing. We've been kind of conditioned to, we've been taught that it's talking about the Antichrist. So everyone's waiting for this 7-year covenant that gets broken in the middle. But I wonder if we're looking at that wrong. Because if we look at it, we know Jesus is coming to bring the new covenant, with both the Jewish and the, Christian people. And, so what if he comes and he's making a firm covenant with many, for 1 week, that's like maybe the first week of work that he's going to do when he gets here. And it says, it uses the word but I think that could also mean and. I'm not really sure, but I think it could also be translated and in the middle of the week he will put a stop to sacrifice and grain offering. And so that kind of goes back to I think there's like sort of a picture with this sacrificial system, and I think sometimes that God is using sheep and goats to really talk about his people. And so I think when he's putting a stop to sacrifice and grain offering, when he comes and he makes this covenant, I think it's possible. Like I said, we see in part, so this is just an idea that I have. I think it's possible that the stop that he's putting to is his people getting killed. And so the sacrifices and the grain offerings, he's gonna come and he's gonna put this hedge of protection around his people, and so that we will no longer be sacrificed by the non-believers to their gods. So just another possibility I'm throwing out there. Anyway, so that's something to think about, to keep in mind that when you're reading the Bible, we're not sure when we read pronouns, when we see the he and the they, who God is talking about. And so that's another reason why we prophesy in part. And so Jesus is going to come and he's going to know who God's talking about with the they, he's and the theys and, all that kind of stuff. So, the other, okay, so I want to go to Haggai, Haggai 2 to bring up, okay, I'm going to talk about dates now, because everyone likes to set dates. And I mean, I have to confess that I sort of like setting dates, because I just like to feel like Jesus is coming, then, just right around the corner. Because I mean, we've all been waiting a long time, and I don't know about you, but I have definitely been in, what I consider slavery, like a bondage. I don't feel like I've been living my full life. And so I really wait in anticipation for Jesus to come to set us free from our slavery. Um, and so, I mean, actually, it's kind of cool that I'm making a video, because I like to teach. I like to teach the Bible, and I really haven't had an opportunity to do that for like 8 years now. And, so I feel like, I mean, it's funny that they talk about the 7-year tribulation period to come, because I feel like I've been in a tribulation period. I feel like 8 years ago, my tribulation started. You know, um, I don't know how you feel. Um, you know, but it just seems like, things were going really well, and then 8 years ago it was like the brakes got put on things. And so so I understand that I have a weakness to set dates, because I really crave the Messiah coming. Because I see that you know not only, just like we prophesy in part, I think as his people, and I'm, sure a lot of other people feel this way too, not only are we prophesying in part, we're living in part. I mean, we are not living our full lives. We're not living how, God designed us to live. We're not able to really live out our worship of God like we would see fit. We're not able to talk about God, like we would prefer. We're actually kind of, in this bondage, this slavery, especially in this country, America, where, I mean, we're definitely not allowed to talk about our belief in Jesus, um, or talk about the Bible, and, you know, so I understand. I have the weakness of, I love listening to videos and someone says, "Hey, Jesus is going to come in 3 days," and it just excites me because, um, you know, um, you know, it just feels like it's closer and stuff. But we've also been doing this for like 3 years now, and um, we've been, a lot of us have been wrong for 3 years, and it's hard because like things feel like they fit into place, like all the patterns and stuff like that fit into place. And so when you see a date, it when you are able to put some of the patterns together and find a date that seems to work, you get excited about that. Um, but after doing this for 3 years, I realized that there's kind of a weakness in this. There's a reason we don't know the day or the hour. Um, like I definitely think we could know the season, and I like highly doubt that there would be a lot of people um, who won't realize that we're in the season. Actually, there probably is, because Jesus said people won't know. There's a lot of people that are probably blind, but um, people that have really been following prophecy and stuff, like we really see things revving up, and just like it just seems like everything, like every day there's, you know, 10 things that are happening that are definitely feeling like we're getting closer to Jesus coming. Um, so I definitely think we are in the season. I think it is really close. A lot of people have talked about the 70th anniversary of of Israel becoming a nation. I agree that something has got to happen before the 71st anniversary, which is in May. So I definitely think we're in the season. We are really close. But I can't say I don't know if it's going to be. I'm hoping Friday. you know, um, but maybe next month. So I mean, we'll just see what happens. But I wanted to talk about what makes it so hard to set a date, like, so that you can understand why we're seeing in part even with the dates. So in Haggai 2:10, this is a verse that I use a lot when I'm looking at dates and stuff like that. Um, okay, so in verse 10 in the NASB, it says, "On the 24th of the ninth month, in the second year of Darius, the word of the Lord came to Haggai the prophet, saying, you know, thus now says the Lord, blah, blah, blah." Okay, so it's talking about the 24th of the ninth month, okay, in the second year of Darius. Okay, so what I like about this verse is that it talks about the second year of Darius. We've passed the 2 year anniversary of Trump becoming president, so that's why the 2 year um, thing definitely sticks out to me. But let's look at the 24th of the ninth month. Like, just as an example, we are in the ninth month since the America moved its embassy to Jerusalem. And so that started on February 14th, was the ninth month. So you could say we're in the ninth month of that. And so, you could look at the date, the 24th. Well, the 24th, okay, there's three ways you could look at the date, the 24th of the ninth month. One is it could be the ninth month, 9 months and 24 days since, the embassy got moved. Okay, so that's sometime in March. Okay, but if you look at the calendar, you could look at the Gregorian calendar, and there was February 24th. That was 2 days ago. That could have been considered the 24th of the ninth month. And then this Friday is the 24th on the Hebrew calendar. And it's the 12th month on the Hebrew calendar, but you could, we don't know. Maybe God is doing some, kind of mixing, this is why I say we won't know until the things happen, and then we could look back and go, oh yeah, God prophesied on it, but he was kind of mixing. He was talking about the ninth month. He was using the ninth month of the embassy, and then he was using the 24th day on the Hebrew calendar. So I don't know, this might sound like heresy to you. If it is, just ignore it. But I did want to point out that it's possible that, God might be mixing his metaphors a little bit. And so that, it's possible. I could be wrong. But it's possible. And so that's why, because I kind of think God left everything mysterious. He did not tell us the day that Jesus was going to come. Everything was really mysterious. And so even these dates, can be very mysterious. Could be mixing a little bit. That God did that, to keep us more in the dark. To keep us walking by faith. So, so I wanted to point out the dates, the possibility. What's interesting over here, I'll point out this too, just while we're here. The NLT in verse 10 talks about on December 18th of the second year of King Darius' reign. Okay, I have, at some point, maybe the 24th of the ninth month on the Hebrew calendar was December 18th. Well, if you know the Hebrew calendar, it changes every year. And so, the next year it's not going to be on December 18th. So it was kind of interesting. It's just trying to keep the English, I guess, the NLT, for the English speakers, and not confuse them, but it's kind of a bad way to do the translation, because I don't know if people are going to look at December 18th and think that means something. I don't know if that makes sense. So anyways, so that's the problem with setting dates, with taking dates from the Bible and stuff like that. So another thing I wanted to talk about was, let's get back to my memos here. Okay, so I wanted to talk about, I mentioned before what I call the self-appointed anointeds, and so it's just kind of interesting because in this day and age with YouTube, we have a lot of people, that, they don't have to go to seminary. They don't have to have a church. They don't have to be appointed by anyone. They can just appoint themselves and say, hey, God appointed me to make videos, And I think some of the people, we don't really know for sure. I think some of them could be deluding themselves. They could be kind of, what is that expression? Delusions of grandeur, that, that they think they're a little more important than they are, especially like if people say they're going to save people by their videos. Okay, we got to remember that we're saved by our faith in Jesus. And so what we believe, I'm not too worried that we're all kind of confused right now and kind of probably don't, there's some things we don't believe accurately. There's that verse that talks about, a partial hardening has happened on Israel until the fullness of the Gentile comes in. we like, I mean, God has sort of like not told us everything, and we don't see fully. Back to the original verse that we talked about, we prophesy in part, we see in part. So I'm not too worried that God's people, are kind of walking sometimes a little bit in darkness, because it's kind of why we need a Messiah. you know, I mean, if we had it all figured out, we wouldn't need Jesus to come and, kind of straighten us out. We wouldn't need a Messiah to save us, Um, I mean, I guess we still would because we need a Messiah to save us from our sins. But one of the things, like I wanted to talk about, okay, so this is kind of an issue that I have with self-appointed anointeds. I mean, it's fine to watch their videos and stuff like that, but like I said, use discernment, be aware. But let me point out this so you could be a little bit more discerned, have more discernment. Um, Joseph and Daniel are messianic figures that we find in the Old Testament. Okay, one of the things that's unique about those two messianic figures is both of them can interpret dreams. Okay, so I kind of think that it is possible that dreams is a shadow, is a way, is a picture that God is using to show us how, when Jesus comes, one of the gifts that he's going to have is the ability to interpret the Bible. Okay. And so, I mean, it was kind of interesting because Joseph and Daniel both kind of got exalted because of their ability to interpret dreams. And so, what I believe is that when Jesus comes, he's going to come and he's going to reveal these mysteries in the Word of God, and it's going to, give them, it's going to, I mean, people are going to flock to him because they're going to want to know these answers, these mysteries that we've been living under for a really long time. And so when we have self-appointed anointeds that say, hey, I'm the one that understands and you need to watch my videos and you need to understand me, they're taking something away from Jesus. Okay, because this is Jesus' job. When he comes, he is going to explain to us how to interpret the Bible. Okay, that's not to say we shouldn't make videos and we shouldn't, talk about this stuff and we shouldn't try to figure it out because, it's just, a great way to be spending our time is to study God's word, but we need to understand that we prophesy in part and we don't see it clearly. Um, I mean, I think it's good to listen to other people because some people might see things, um, that I'm missing. I could watch someone else and learn from them because they might be seeing kind of a little part, um, in the Bible that is, passing me by because I don't quite understand it. You know, so we could all learn from each other, and that's what's great about YouTube and the videos, on YouTube that we can watch. Um, but don't make any of these people your Messiah. You wait for Jesus. Jesus is your Messiah. He is gonna completely solve the mystery. So then what that means too is hold all these teachings loosely, because we see in part, and so we, when, you know, if we hold them loosely, we're not going to get all thrown bent out of shape when Jesus comes and says, you're believing wrong, so like even like the whole part about a 7-year tribulation period, maybe hold that kind of loosely, I mean, it, maybe it'd make you feel better thinking that we've just been through, the tribulation period. I mean, I separate tribulation and wrath. Um, you know, I mean, God's people are definitely going to go through tribulation. It talks about that. I mean, probably a whole nother video that I should do sometime. But you know, I think it is possible. I'll say it this way. I think it is possible we have been through a tribulation period, the tribulation that God destined for his people. And so I think it's possible that we could be coming to the end of that, and then there's a reversal of fortunes, and that God's enemies then become the ones that get put under tribulation during the time of his wrath. So just a quick on that without doing a whole video. Um, so So when it comes to setting dates, I like it when people talk about this is a high watch date. Because obviously when we see these patterns and stuff like that, um, there's certain dates that stick out, and I think it's always good to say this is a high watch date, because what that means is so we sit and watch and see what happens on that date. Because I've seen in the past 3 years that all the different dates that we set, well, Jesus didn't come back, but there were certain things that happened on some of these dates that we were looking at. Um, and so that's why it's just a better to just say, hey, this is a high watch date. Things and patterns in the Bible seem to point to this date. So let's just watch and see what happens. So there you go. That's my video on um, seeing in parts and prophesying in parts. And so I hope you enjoyed it. So by the grace of God, I'd like to make some other videos, but we'll see what happens. So I'm sorry too about my voice. I've been sick, so I've had a sinus infection. So, anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for listening. Take care. God bless.